Madam Secretary, we are ready to begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. This is the time and place that has been noticed for the open meeting of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to consider the matters that have been duly posted by the Commission. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioners, since the September open meeting, the Commission has issued 61 notational orders. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Welcome to everybody. I know you had a little time to listen to the music. I hope you had a chance to listen to some of it. Those of you internally, those of you watching, we no longer have that capability, but the music this month was chosen by the Office of External Affairs, and very much a Halloween theme to the songs, except for one. One song was "Happy Birthday," which reminds us that today is our General Counsel Matt Christensen's birthday. Happy birthday, Matt! Everyone who knows Matt knows he possesses a brilliant mind, and many people who know Matt knows that he also has a penchant for writing law review articles, especially energy-related law review articles. And in particular, Matt is very good at writing footnotes, or adding footnotes to those articles. And just like trees, they get rings, they grow rings every year as they get older. Matt adds 10 footnotes to each law review article. So Matt, we look forward to the next brilliant masterpiece. Moving on, Monday, millions of people around the world, Hindu, Jain, and Sikh faiths, will be celebrating Diwali, and that includes many of our family. And I just wanted to note that Diwali is known as the Festival of Lights, and it's a celebration of knowledge over ignorance and good over evil. And I want to extend our warm wishes to everybody who's going to be celebrating next week. And I wanted to make two personnel announcements this morning. First of all, Eric Vandenberg, who currently is the Deputy Director in our Office of Energy Policy and Innovation, the OPI office, will next week be moving over to become the Deputy Director of the Office of Electric Reliability. Now, prior to joining OPI, many of you know Eric. He was with Chairman Chatterjee. He was a technical advisor in Chairman Chatterjee's office, and he covered a number of issues, which included grid reliability, and I know we had a chance to work on some of those issues when he was up here on the 11th floor, and I'm very excited that Eric has agreed to take on this very important responsibility. Eric is no stranger to the Office of Electric Reliability. I think he started his first career there as an engineer in the Office of Compliance, their Division of Compliance. And I know that Eric's up for the job which is of a very, very important and increasingly important role in the Office of Electricity in terms of electric reliability, in terms of ensuring grid reliability. So look forward to working with Eric as we move forward. And second, Michael McLaughlin is going to be replacing Eric as Deputy Director of OPI. Now, over the last 7 years, Michael has served as the Director of OPI's Division of Economic and Technical Analysis, where he's provided critical leadership on a range of market issues. And before joining the Commission way back in 2003, he held several other very important positions, including with PJM and also the Federal Reserve Office in Philadelphia. Michael has a wealth of knowledge as it relates to energy market issues, and especially issues regulated by the Commission, and we're going to continue to benefit, I should say, from his expertise. And again, look forward to working with Michael. So congratulations to both Eric and Michael on their new positions. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Commissioner Phillips and I went down to Port Arthur, Texas, and Lake Charles, Louisiana, to meet with a number of environmental justice advocates down there. And they took the time out of their busy schedules to help to tour a number of facilities down there, a number of areas down there. And it's a very petrochemical laden set of areas, and got a chance to really learn from them and talk to them, and really appreciated their willingness to spend time with us, which was a substantial amount of time. We got a chance to really learn a lot about their communities, about their concerns, about their hopes, and so on. And it's a good opportunity. All of the commissioners, we go out and meet with a ton of folks. We speak to groups, we meet with groups, a lot of different stakeholders. It's important to get a variety of views from folks that have issues or concerns related to issues that are pending before the Commission. And often, many of the stakeholders we deal with, they have Washington, D.C. representation. Either they're here as trade associations, or they have people that work for them here, or they hire outside counsel, and we certainly interact with them there. But sometimes not everyone has the resources to do that, and it's very important to make sure that we have input from a whole variety of folks. And some in terms of and it's very helpful and very important for us to reach out to those folks in terms of their to understand their thoughts, and to make sure that they provide input for us. So when we make the important decisions that we make, that we have a full record to make our decisions on. And that's what our Office of Public Participation is all about as well. And that's why we're reaching out to these folks. But I really want to thank them for taking time with us. And I also want to say that Commissioner Phillips and I also had the opportunity to tour the Sabine Pass LNG facility down there, which to me was fascinating. And I think we learned a lot from them. And I appreciate the folks down at Cheniere touring us, giving us a tour, and also providing some input for us as well. Again, it's very important for us to see the facilities that we regulate and we oversee, and appreciate everyone taking that time. I'm going to defer my comments on the winter assessment. We're going to have a presentation on that in a couple of minutes. But I do want to briefly talk about two orders that are on today's consent agenda, and they're in E5 and E6. Under FERC regulations, I think most people know that parties or entities are considered affiliates of each other if one entity owns 10% or more of the voting securities of another entity. But also, sometimes our regulations also provide that we also can deem other entities to be affiliated if they have such close relationships for other reasons that's worthwhile providing a little extra regulatory scrutiny in terms of their activities. And you might ask, why is this important? Why is it so important when you deem someone an affiliate of another entity? And the reason is because it's all about from a consumer protection angle, whether it be entities that might be able to use their market power together in a particular energy market around the country, or maybe they engage in transactions between themselves to the disadvantage of captive customers. And it's very important that we have the kind of insight to understand when parties are affiliated, so that we can do a better job of regulating entities and overseeing their activities. So in both E5 and E6, the Commission is presented with a corporate relationship in a situation where one investors in utilities, are able to have the ability and have actually appointed directors to the utility boards, where those directors are related to the entity making the appointment. So, for instance, either a board member of their own or some employee of their own. And there's clearly a relationship here. And so the Commission is saying in these two orders that if that's the type of relationship, if one company does provide or essentially name board members to the second company, in which the board member is affiliated with the first company, then we're going to deem that to be an affiliate relationship. I think it's an important issue going forward. I think that will provide some more certainty for everyone out there as they structure various arrangements, financial arrangements, and so on. But I think it's very important from a Commission perspective in terms of protecting consumers, and that's why we're issuing the orders we are today. With that, I don't have anything more to say to our orders. I'll talk more again about the winter assessment, but I do want to turn it over to our colleagues and start with Commissioner Danley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing to begin. I'll talk after the presentation.
Thanks, Commissioner Danley. Commissioner Kumatz.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning, and thank you for your patience this morning. Made all the more impressive by the temperature, which seems to not be up to par. Maybe we're, I don't know, in the opposite of a demand response program. But before I begin, congratulations to Eric and Michael. That's really exciting news. It's always exciting when we get to promote good staff and have them take on new responsibilities. I also want to mention that October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and that is the perfect time to talk about our newest employee resource group here at FERC, which is called Accessible FERC. It's led by Alyssa Meyer in OPI and Brian White in OEMR, and it aims to promote a culture of diversity and accessibility within the Commission and to educate around related issues. So kudos to Brian and Alyssa, and certainly all of the staff who are thinking about these issues at the Commission this month and always. I'll speak a little bit, not on the docketed proceedings today, but I wanted to reflect a little bit on the technical conference we held, and I don't even remember if it was last week or earlier this month, on transmission planning and cost management. The record before us, I've said this before, suggests a once-in-a-generation need for coordinated regional and interregional transmission investment to upgrade aging infrastructure, to facilitate customer access to lower cost new resources, and to shore up system reliability. Ensuring sufficient cost management is part and parcel, not only of protecting customers along the way, but also to ensuring legitimacy to the review process that will facilitate state buy-in, state regulatory buy-in, and other stakeholder buy-in to the value of any given project development. As I noted at the conference, I think several people did, the primary issues we face are twofold. One is ensuring that projects from local all the way up through into regional are optimized for cost efficiency in the planning process. And second is that once those projects are chosen for development, that costs are prudently incurred. And I heard a lot of support at the technical conference for the Commission to spend more time thinking about these issues going forward. I want to mention 3 takeaways I had from that day. First, we learned that there is really a patchwork approach to considering transmission projects across the country. There are real differences in whether states evaluate need and prudence. And it's worth noting again, as an example, the Office of Consumer Counsel's contribution from my home state of Ohio. There, he said that in more than 75% of the costs of new transmission projects may fall between the cracks of federally jurisdictional and state jurisdictional regulatory review. So how do we ensure that projects are getting the proper level of vetting before we spend customers' money? Second, there's broad support for some form of an independent transmission monitor that could act as an extra set of eyes, particularly for states who may not have the resources to take a hard look every time. Participants expressed concern over a lack of access to information, but also, if they have the information, a lack of ability to synthesize and analyze that information within the time frame available. We should explore ways to level this information playing field, and an independent transmission monitor is one potential approach. There were several different perspectives shared on what an ITM role might look like, especially regarding whether that role should be purely informational and analytical, or whether it should encompass some sort of participation akin to an independent market monitor that exists today. While the areas meriting increased oversight are becoming clearer, the job description for an ITM is still in development, and I hope you all will help us out by providing more detail around the responsibilities that an ITM might prioritize. Third, I heard some frustration with how the Commission's prudence standard has been used to flow costs through to customers. There are various concerns about opportunities for challenging prudence and whether the Commission should consider making any changes. My hope is that we'll be issuing a supplemental notice seeking post-technical conference comments, and I really want to hear from stakeholders about how the Commission can best maximize efficiency and development, and this is important, without slowing down the process in a manner that could frustrate beneficial projects. I want to end on that point because I think it is really important. While ensuring sufficient cost management is a no less than critical component of an effective transmission system build-out, we will fail in our responsibility as a Commission if it is designed and implemented in a way that stymies needed transmission development required for ensuring reliability and affordable access to electricity. And so that is my focus in the next few months, and I look forward to engaging on that. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Commissioner Clements. Commissioner Christie.
Is it on? She's going to remind me. Okay. All right. First of all, happy birthday to Matt. I didn't know it was your birthday. I'm interested in the chairman's remarks about your obsession with footnotes. And it actually triggered a memory. There's a Kurt Vonnegut novel, I think it's Kurt Vonnegut, where there's a character that he describes as having a doctorate in footnoting as a professor. And he said the only problem was an impressive doctorate, but no students ever signed up for his classes. And at parties, people fled in horror because they didn't want to get stuck in a conversation about footnoting. So, but that was Kurt Vonnegut's take on it. So, Anyway, follow up on Commissioner Clements' very astute comments about the technical conference we had a couple weeks ago on transmission costs. And there's no question transmission costs are going up substantially. And I hope we follow up on that. And one of the issues she just mentioned, and I fully agree with it, is the fact that what we have across the country is we have a lot of states that simply don't have any authority left. Some of it's been stripped of the state utility commission's ability to thoroughly vet and scrutinize transmission projects. And it could be very expensive projects, And in some states, as we've learned, there's just no scrutiny because the state utility commissions have been stripped of their authority. I was out at the OPSI meeting this week in Indianapolis, and the Organization of PJM States, and every state regulator I talked to at OPSI had either watched the technical conference or been told about it or learned about it, and agreed that this is a critical issue. Not surprising you would hear this from state regulators, but that they can't, a lot of them feel like they're in states where they don't have the authority to really scrutinize these projects. And as we look at spending, literally hundreds of billions of dollars over the years to come on transmission, I think it's absolutely essential that there needs to be thorough scrutiny before transmission projects move forward. And I've said it before, at the state level, I mean, state regulators need to be the ones who bat in the bottom of the ninth. A project can be put into a regional plan, can be approved in a regional plan of an RTO, the RTEP, MTEP, whatever the acronym is. But at the end of the day, it's going to be built in the state, and the state regulators need to have the siting authority, and more importantly, or just as importantly, they need to have the authority to determine whether the project is actually needed and actually the cost is prudent. And there's states where that happens, and there's states where it doesn't. And so we need to be looking at ways we can, at least from a FERC standpoint, because again, we don't tell states how to run their processes, but we do determine who gets formula rate treatment. And so FERC has a role in this. So I hope we continue, as Commissioner Clement said, I hope we have opportunity for comment. I've been inviting people to send comments in, so hopefully there'll be a vehicle for that. But we've got to look at transmission cost. I mean, this is a big part of the bill. It's been going up over the last decade. Transmission rate base in America has almost tripled in the last 10 years. And what goes into rate base goes into consumers' monthly bills, no question about it. And it goes in not only on a dollar for dollar recovery basis, but it goes in with a profit, with an ROE. So rate base equals consumer bills. So we got to be on the lookout and watch out for the big increase in transmission costs, and not just over the past decade, but what people are contemplating over the next decade or two, and make sure those things are being thoroughly scrutinized. So thank you, Commissioner Clements, for bringing that up, and also it was a very good topic to have, and thank the chairman for scheduling it. It was a very salient topic. Again, at OPSI, everybody was talking to me about that, and so we need to act on that and continue to follow up. With regard to the agenda items today, I don't have much to say. I'm just going to note that in E1, which is the New York ISO filing regarding their Order 2222, I have a concurrence in that'll be filed. In E15, which is the Blue Ridge and Appalachian dispute over contract, I'm going to be dissenting in that because I think that issue ought to be settled. It's a contract issue that ought to be settled in the civil courts of Virginia, not by FERC. And in C4, I'm going to have a concurring statement in that one. And beyond that, I'll be yes on all the rest. That's it.
Thanks, Commissioner Christie. Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to offer my congratulations to Eric and Michael on their much-deserved promotion. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned our trip to Port Arthur and Lake Charles. I'll have to say I thought it was a successful and very informative trip. In particular, I want to thank the environmental organizers who hosted us, Rashida, James, and John. I thank them for their hospitality. I also really appreciated meeting with the folks in the community, the residents, and hearing from them directly about their concerns. This is something that I hope to continue to do, and I will look for opportunities to do in the future. I won't be long, but I'll add and echo the comments from Commissioner Christie, Commissioner Clements about the cost management technical conference. I thought it was informative as well. My office will continue to explore targeted solutions to address affordability as we build out the transmission system for the clean energy transition. So with that, I'll hold the rest of my comments until after the staff presentation.
Thanks, Commissioner Phillips. Madam Secretary, I think we're ready to go to the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the issuance of the Sunshine Act notice on October 13th, 2022, items G1, C5, and C6 have been stricken from this morning's agenda. Your consent agenda is as follows. Electric items, E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6, E7, E8, E9, E10, E11, E12, E13, E14, and E15. Gas item, the gas item is G2. Hydro items are H1 and H2. Certificate items are C1, C2, C3, and C4. Commissioner Danley is not participating in item G2. As to E1, Commissioner Clements is dissenting in part with a separate statement. Commissioner Danley is concurring with a separate statement. And Commissioner Christie is concurring with a separate statement. As to E8, Commissioner Danley is dissenting with a separate statement. As to E10, Commissioner Danley is concurring with a separate statement. As to E11, Commissioner Danley is dissenting with a separate statement. As to E12, Commissioner Danley is dissenting with a separate statement. As to E15, Commissioner Danley is dissenting with a separate statement, and Commissioner Christie is dissenting with a separate statement. As to C1, Chairman Glick and Commissioner Clements are concurring with a joint separate statement. And Commissioner Danley is concurring in part with a separate statement. As to C2, Chairman Glick is concurring with a separate statement, and Commissioner Danley is concurring in part with a separate statement. As to C4, Chairman Glick is concurring with a separate statement. Commissioner Danley is concurring in part with a separate statement. And Commissioner Christie is concurring with a separate statement. We are now ready to take a vote on this morning's consent agenda. The vote begins with Commissioner Phillips.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Christie.
Noting my dissent in E15, I vote aye on everything else.
Commissioner Clements.
Noting my dissent in part in E1 and my joint concurrence with Chairman Glick in C1, I vote aye.
Commissioner Danley.
Noting my dissents in E8, E11, E12, and E15, my concurrences in E1 and E10, and my concurrences in part in C1, C2, and C4, and my non-participation in G2, I vote aye.
And Chairman Glick.
Noting my joint concurrence with Commissioner Clements in C1 and my concurrences in C2 and C4, I vote aye.
We are now ready to move on to the discussion and presentation portion of the meeting. This morning's presentation is item A3 concerning the 2022-2023 Winter Energy Market and Reliability Assessment. There will be a presentation by Alexander Ovandenko from the Office of Energy Policy and Innovation, Sasan Jalali from the Office of Electric Reliability, and Kelly Shannon from the Office of Energy Policy and Innovation. They are accompanied by Maria Hanley from the Office of Electric Reliability and Thomas Pinkston from the Office of Energy Policy and Innovation. You may begin your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Office of Electric Reliability and the Office of Energy Policy and Innovation are pleased to present the 2022-2023 Winter Energy Market and Reliability Assessment. The Winter Energy Market and Reliability Assessment is staff's opportunity to share its analyses and forecasts about the energy markets and electric reliability for the upcoming winter. This presentation and the associated report reflect the efforts of a large team, of whom only a few are presenting today. Presenting with me today are Sasan Jalali and Kelly Shannon. Our presentation slides and the complete report will be posted on the Commission's website. Next slide, please. This presentation summarizes notable electric reliability expectations and natural gas and electric market fundamentals across the United States this winter. To start, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, forecasts a mild winter for most of the country. Regarding natural gas this winter, forecasts anticipate that continued growth in net exports will place additional pressure on natural gas prices. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, exports alone are anticipated to increase by 10.9% relative to last winter. Rising global LNG demand is driving greater demand for U.S. LNG exports and is forecast to have a significant impact on the limited LNG import market in New England. Utilization of U.S. LNG export facilities is expected to be high this winter because of strong expected profits from exports. According to preliminary NERC data, all planning regions forecast enough generation available to meet their planning reserve margins through the winter. However, fuel availability remains critical to the reliability of the bulk power system. Regions with high levels of natural gas generation may experience scarcity in natural gas supplies, such as the Northeast. Next slide, please. Rail service issues that first developed during the COVID-19 pandemic are expected to continue impacting coal stockpiles. U.S. coal producers may be unable to fully respond to demand changes due to gas-to-coal switching driven by higher natural gas prices. This winter, ISO New England expects to maintain electric reliability without the need for a fuel inventory program such as the Inventoried Energy Program or the Winter Reliability Program. More specifically, ISO New England expects to operate the grid reliably through a mild winter, but it may need to employ operating procedures to maintain reliability through a moderate winter. ISO New England notes that it has worked with stakeholders to implement measures to enhance energy adequacy and situational awareness. Fuel availability for power generation is a primary concern in the winter readiness of ISO New England. Natural gas futures prices at Algonquin City Gate near Boston are at $23.57 per MMBTU, 38% higher than last winter. Similarly high LNG prices could lead to scarce natural gas supply during peak demand events. Continued pipeline constraints will affect Southern California and the desert Southwest this winter. El Paso Natural Gas's Line 2000 remains on an indefinite force majeure following an explosion in Arizona in August 2021. Additionally, TC Energy's Baja Express project, a pipeline that can serve an LNG export terminal along Mexico's Pacific coast, enters service this fall. This project could potentially redirect natural gas supply from California to Mexico based on price differences at the hubs and nearby LNG terminals. Next slide, please. We will now turn to the weather forecast. In its current 3-month outlook for December 2022 through February 2023, NOAA forecasts a high probability of above normal temperatures for the south, southwest, and northeast when compared to the last 30 years. However, there is a high probability that the northwest and west-north central regions could experience below average temperatures. Higher than average temperatures during the winter season typically lead to lower than average demand for electricity and natural gas. Next slide, please. This slide shows the expected electric capacity additions and retirements since last winter across different regions. From March 2022 through March 2023, capacity additions are expected to total about 43 gigawatts, most of which are from solar and wind, while most of the expected 15 gigawatts of retirements are from coal and nuclear units. Please note that newly installed capacity may or may not replace retiring capacity based on their accredited capacity values. Next slide, please. And now I will turn the presentation over to my colleague, Sazan Jalali, who will discuss preparations for the upcoming winter and electric system reliability fundamentals.
Thank you, Alex. To ensure each region has adequate electric capacity to meet load under different scenarios, NERC, regional entities, RTOs, and ISOs track the available resources and net transfers in excess of expected peak demand. In this slide, demand is shown in solid bars for the upcoming winter and also the last winter, while the sum of the projected resources and net transfers are shown as diamond shapes. While all regions show sufficient resources to meet demand, some may experience challenges for extreme winter conditions. This is because the projections for resources and net transfers and demand do not consider additional factors during an extreme event, such as fuel unavailability for gas units, additional derates and production declines of thermal and intermittent resources, unexpected transmission or resource outages, reduced power transfers, and increased peak load demand. To better assess these factors, each NERC region also performs a probabilistic analysis to identify unanticipated events for potential energy shortfalls, including a scenario for an extreme winter condition. Initial results from this preliminary analysis suggest that capacity may be especially tight in several regions during extreme weather conditions, including ISO New England, ERCOT, MISO, and also parts of CERC. In the event of a capacity shortage to meet load, operators resort to operational mitigation actions, such as importing additional power, requesting voluntary load curtailment, appealing to conserve load, lowering load by reducing operating voltages, and drawing down operating reserves. For ISO New England, concern remains regarding the ability to maintain energy adequacy for severe winter conditions similar to what we saw in the 2013-14 polar vortex. To address these concerns, ISO New England has implemented several measures, including continuing its 21-day energy assessment, posturing generating units to conserve stored fuel, retaining Mistake Units 8 and 9 under a cost of service agreement, and continuing to survey fossil fuel units on a weekly or daily basis for expected fuel availability. Initial results provided by NERC regions also show that ERCOT and MISO may be at risk for energy emergencies during extreme winter conditions for the upcoming winter. However, the improvements made since last year's winter storm Uri should reduce the likelihood and the severity of that risk. For example, state regulations require Texas generators and transmission owners to winterize equipment and facilities. ERCOT conducted over 300 weather readiness inspections last year, and MISO continues to coordinate unit winterization and to survey members' fuel supply and to communicate with neighbors on transfers during an extreme winter condition. Next slide, please. There has been additional progress on winter readiness efforts related to the February 21, 2021 cold weather event report, which included 28 recommendations. The first recommendation includes 10 proposals for new mandatory reliability standards for generators to withstand extreme cold weather conditions and also for improved grid emergency operations. NERC plans to file proposed new standards with the Commission, responding to approximately half of the Recommendation 1 proposal by this November, with the remainder filed by next winter. The Commission and NERC have also made progress on additional key recommendations, including holding a technical conference in April 2022 focused on improving generating unit cold weather reliability, and convening a gas electric forum in August 2022 led by North American Energy Standards Board, NAESB. The forum will work with Commission, NERC staff, and National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, NARUC, to identify actions needed to improve the reliability of the natural gas infrastructure system necessary to support bulk power system reliability. 17 recommendations have also been incorporated into work plans at NERC committees and task forces. Also, FERC, NERC, and regional entity staff are working with NARUC staff and committees on additional recommendations that are within state jurisdiction. And now I'll turn the presentation over to my colleague, Kelly Shannon, who will discuss natural gas market fundamentals.
Thank you, Sasan. Thank you, Sasan. Moving on to natural gas markets. Natural gas futures prices this winter are higher compared to the final settled prices of last winter at nearly every major trading hub across the U.S. As of October 12th of this year, the Henry Hub futures contract price is up 30% from last winter's settled price. increasing $1.57 per million BTU to $6.82 per million BTU for December 2022 through February 2023. According to EIA, higher Henry Hub spot prices this year are attributable to rising domestic natural gas consumption, relatively minor natural gas production growth, lower than average natural gas storage inventories, and continued growth in LNG exports. Notably, prices at the Algonquin Citygate Hub outside Boston has the largest expected year-over-year futures price increase of $6.49 per MMBTU, with futures prices rising from $17.08 per MMBTU for winter 2021 through 2022 to $23.57 per MMBTU for winter 2022 through 2023. The factors driving this include New England's limited natural gas pipeline capacity and competition for LNG cargoes amid rising global LNG prices and demand. Global markets are also forecasted to affect overall U.S. natural gas markets and prices this year. U.S. LNG export demand is forecasted to remain high this winter due to strong forecasted profits for exporting to both European and Asian markets. Regional fundamentals in Europe, a major demand market for LNG, have also played a part, as natural gas prices in Europe reached all-time highs in 2021 and 2022, and remain high heading into the winter. High global LNG prices are likely to persist, incentivizing U.S. LNG export demand, while also driving higher peak natural gas prices in New England. Next slide, please. Now I will cover natural gas production and demand. This winter, natural gas production is forecasted to increase more than 3% above last winter, rising to over 99 billion cubic feet per day, or BCFD. As of October 12, 2022, the forecast winter demand for natural gas, including net exports, is forecast to increase slightly over last winter by 2.4% to 121.2 BCFD. An anticipated 24% increase in net exports relative to last winter is driving most of the forecasted increase in natural gas demand, along with an anticipated 3.5% increase in residential and commercial demand. Forecasts indicate that industrial and other uses will decline year over year. Next slide, please. Moving on to natural gas exports and imports. The EIA forecasts U.S. LNG gross exports to average 12.5 BCFD between December 2022 and February 2023, a 10.9% increase from the average last winter. In addition, pipeline gross exports are forecast to see year-over-year growth, averaging 9.4 BCFD, up 11.7% from last winter. LNG liquefaction capacity has increased in the last year and should serve heightened international LNG demand. Cheniere Energy's Sabine Pass and Venture Global LNG's Calcasieu Pass have added liquefaction capacity since last winter, causing U.S. liquefaction capacity to increase 1.9 BCFD to 13.8 BCFD. Although there has been an increase in overall LNG liquefaction capacity this year, the 2 BCFD Freeport LNG facility in Texas went offline on June 8th and has not yet resumed operations. Historically, U.S. LNG cargoes have primarily served Asian markets. However, high European natural gas prices have incentivized more LNG exports to Europe in 2022, and LNG exports to Europe began outpacing exports to Asia in November 2021. Next slide, please. EIA forecasts natural gas storage inventories to begin the winter withdrawal season nearly 6% below the 5-year average. These lower than average natural gas storage inventories are forecast despite a higher than average injection season. Further, these lower than average inventories may be offset by lower than average withdrawals. Withdrawals for the upcoming winter are forecast to be 7.4% below the 5-year average. Overall, total natural gas storage levels are forecast to be 2.8% lower than the 5-year average at the start of the 2023 injection season. Next slide, please. This concludes staff's prepared comments. A copy of this presentation and staff's report will be posted on the Commission's website at ferc.gov. Thank you. We are happy to answer questions from the Chairman and Commissioners.
Well, thank you all very much, really for the presentation, but also for the extremely hard work in putting together this winter assessment. It's, I think it's a pretty lengthy presentation, but the report itself is lengthier, but I really commend all of you to read it. I learned a lot from it. There's a lot of good factoids. There's a lot of very interesting information about the state of our electricity and natural gas markets, and of course reliability issues. So really want to commend you on an excellent job putting this together. I had 4 takeaways. I had a lot of takeaways actually, but I had 4 major takeaways from this particular report. And the first one is, it is good news that in each region of the country we have sufficient amount of generating capacity to meet expected demand under normal conditions. But we also know, based on the last several years, that extreme weather can occur quite frequently and all over the place in different forms. And obviously, extreme weather can wreak havoc in a whole bunch of ways. We've seen it over the last couple of years. And so we need to remain continuously vigilant. All we have to do is, again, I know I've mentioned Winter Storm Uri a lot, but all you got to do is think about Winter Storm Uri and what happened down in Texas with the extreme cold and the fact that 200 people died. So it's they had plenty of generating capacity. That wasn't the issue. It's not getting more generating capacity. It's actually making sure the generating capacity is available, is working, and also has sufficient fuel or whatever else drives that generating capacity. Second, and everyone probably knows we had a forum in Burlington, Vermont, not that long ago, and we talked a lot about concerns with regard to this coming winter in New England and also the upcoming several winters in New England. And we know that, again, they have sufficient amount of generating capacity when you think about it for expected demand. But the question there is, do they have sufficient fuel, especially during really very cold weather or prolonged periods of cold weather, in particular natural gas and fuel oil. And it's important that we keep an eye on what's going on. Obviously, I said this up in New England, and I still feel the same way. It's just crazy to be so reliant on LNG imports. It's just not sustainable. The region needs to do something about that, and the Commission needs to take a look at that as well. Third, prices. Obviously, that's going to be a big topic of discussion for consumers around the country this particular winter. With regard, natural gas prices are expected to go up significantly, and we've seen the future prices that were just discussed a couple minutes ago. The good news is, if you think about the future prices, what it was a few months ago versus now, it's not as high, in part because I think production is increasing. Demand is not forecast to be as high as it was originally forecast to be. And so I think we're, if you can get a silver lining out of this dark cloud, it's that prices aren't going to be nearly as high as we expected, but still $6.80 or whatever it is for future prices, that's still very high. And that then people are going to suffer, whether it be folks that are using natural gas for heating, or whether on the electricity side, because we all know that around the country, natural gas prices have a significant impact on significant upward pressure, in particular on electricity prices. So something, again, we need to keep an eye on. And at the Commission, we don't have authority over natural gas prices, we do have authority over market manipulation, and we need to make sure that people don't take advantage of the situation. And then finally, I think this is, it's interesting when you look at the report and see the impacts of the different sectors of demand for natural gas in the United States. And when you think about it, reading these reports over the last several years, the domestic demand for natural gas really isn't going up. It's really pretty level. I mean, this winter there's expected to be, relatively small increase for, I think, residential and commercial heating, for instance. But on the industrial sector and the use of electricity, natural gas demand is actually going to be expected to be down, I think, where it was last winter. But we also see upward pressure on prices, and that's because of exports. There's a dramatic amount of export increase with regard to LNG, but also what I found really interesting about this report is through pipelines too. We actually we're exporting a lot more via pipeline than we had been before. And again, there are good reasons for it. I'm not contesting the geostrategic significance of natural gas exports. So we all know what's happening to our friends over in Europe right now. But it does have an upward pressure on natural gas prices, and it's something we need to think about. So with that, I do have 3 questions for you all, if that's okay, and then we'll move on for our colleagues. The first one, I just mentioned this, but in the aftermath of the Russian attack on Ukraine and the resulting concerns about European energy security, can we expect the demand for U.S. LNG exports to grow significantly over the next several years?
Thank you for your question. We expect to see continued high utilization of U.S. LNG export terminals in response to the increased European demand. In other words, higher U.S. LNG exports. The U.S. has witnessed an increased shift in the share of LNG being exported to Europe relative to the share of LNG being exported to Asia since November 2021. Europe is likely to rely on U.S.-sourced LNG this winter. There is no resumption of Russian natural gas flows to Europe. In addition, growing LNG import demand in regions outside of Europe, most notably Asia, could also drive future U.S. exports. Furthermore, U.S. LNG capacity is expected to grow by about 5.8 billion cubic feet per day, BCFD, by 2025 due to ongoing construction at 3 new projects: Golden Pass LNG, Plaquemines LNG, and Corpus Christi Stage 3. If Europe continues to experience energy security issues, we anticipate U.S. LNG export cargoes to continue to go to Europe. We note that on March 25, 2022, the White House issued a statement that the European Commission would work with European Union member states towards the goal of ensuring, until at least 2030, demand for approximately 4.8 BCFD of additional U.S. LNG that is consistent with the shared net zero emission goals.
Thank you very much. My second question really relates to something I said just a minute ago, which is I'm curious about the drivers for natural gas pricing in the United States. There's obviously we see the prices around the world; they're incredibly high. But with regard to U.S. prices, we see demand domestically not going up much. What are the drivers? Why are natural gas prices going up? Are expected to go up this year?
Thank you for that question. I can take this one as well. Domestic consumption, which as you noted includes natural gas used inside the U.S. but excludes net exports, is expected to see relatively little growth this winter. However, natural gas storage inventories are expected to be lower than storage inventories entering last winter. This means that the risk of a supply shortfall increases in a very cold winter scenario because the market is limited in its ability to rely on storage withdrawals to balance supply and demand. In addition, net exports are expected to grow compared to last winter. High global LNG prices are likely to continue to incent U.S. LNG exports, even in a very cold winter scenario in which U.S. spot prices climb well above recent averages. Therefore, lower storage inventories and growing U.S. LNG exports are likely contributing to higher futures prices. Heading into the winter, as domestic market participants contemplate an acceptable market price they are willing to pay for future delivery of natural gas.
Thank you very much. My last question really relates to the aftermath of Winter Storm Uri and the joint FERC-NERC staff report that came out of it. So I think everyone's aware that about 10 years ago, maybe a little more than 10 years ago now, there was an extreme cold snap in Texas and surrounding areas. A lot of there were blackouts, there was concern, there was report. The report done recommendations. The recommendations were put on the shelf. The report got the recommendations gathered dust. Nothing happened. So lo and behold, we have another event 10 years later. What a surprise! No one did anything with the recommendations. We have another event 10 years later, and then of course we did another. We did the recent. We had the recent NERC-FERC staff report, which was an excellent report. Issued a number of recommendations, and I'm curious. First of all, we're very committed. I think all of our colleagues are making sure that this does not happen again. The same situation doesn't reoccur again. And so, with those recommendations, I'm curious the status of those recommendations, and in particular, how you think that might be impacting grid reliability or electric reliability coming into this winter.
Thank you for your question. The bulk power system is better positioned to manage extreme cold weather. The first set of nationwide cold weather standards were approved by the Commission in August last year, 6 months after the cold weather event. The Commission strongly encouraged generator owners to implement them more quickly if possible. Evidence shows that industry has made progress towards addressing winter readiness. The standard becomes mandatory and enforceable April of next year, April 2023. The 2021 report has many recommendations with focus on generator cold weather reliability because it was the largest cause. Those recommendations are in the process of being addressed, which include more standards over and above those previously approved, which should prevent grid operators from facing the same situation they were faced with in last year. Regional activities have also helped to better prepare the grid for extreme winter conditions. For example, ERCOT conducted over 300 weather readiness inspections last year due to Texas state regulation to winterize equipment. In addition, both planners and operators are incorporating lessons learned from the February 2021 event to better manage the bulk power system reliability this winter.
Thank you very much for that answer and also for the report again. Excellent job, all of you. Thank you so much. I turn it over to Commissioner Danley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't have any questions, but we just heard the assessment in this presentation, and for certain parts of the country, large regions, the story for natural gas is scarce and expensive, and increasingly so. And my concern, which I've written about and spoken about a great deal, is that I don't think that at least that part of the problem over which we have jurisdiction, we're doing what we can as an agency to take care of the systemic problems that cause some of the scarcity and price rises, which is the development of natural gas pipeline infrastructure. We've had significant delays in the processing of many of our Section 3 and Section 7 applications. In some cases, it's driven by what I view to be unnecessary gilding the lily for environmental review. In some cases, it's unprecedented procedure being applied. But the reason why this is important is that I've heard repeatedly from the operators of these pipelines that it used to be that they were able to fairly confidently know that if they dotted all their I's and crossed their T's, they would be able to get a decision on the merits, a yes or no, within 18 to 24 months. That had been the long-standing practice, and now it is difficult to know when or if they're going to get a decision on the merits for the applications that they file. And the effect of that is that they can't give a timeline to anyone, not to their bankers, not to their potential contractual counterparties, not to the ultimate end users, not to their shippers. And it makes it very difficult for them to rationally deploy or get access to capital in this capital-intensive industry. And the problem, of course, is that our mission under the NGA, as we've been instructed by the courts, is to encourage the orderly development of natural gas infrastructure to ensure plentiful supplies of natural gas at reasonable prices. And if we have delays and processing uncertainty and regulatory uncertainty that stultifies the development of this infrastructure that is absolutely critical and in some regions is in fact driving the scarcity and price increases, then we're failing to do our duty properly. Certainly I have heard repeatedly that the demand is there for increased use of natural gas. It's not as though there is no demand for it. It is the regulatory uncertainty that's the burden prohibiting further development of the infrastructure we're charged with promoting the orderly development of. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Danley. Commissioner Clements.
Thanks, Chairman Gleick. Thank you all for coming today and sharing this report, and to Alexander's point, to the large team that isn't here, who also worked hard on this. These reports are so great. I think I said this when the summer assessment came out, but it's such a nice compilation of data. I remember as a stakeholder just going onto the EIA website and just getting this dull panic that started building up, trying to figure out what I was trying to figure out. And I think for those of you who don't have large shops doing this work for you, this is a great set of resources. Print it out, keep it on your desk, and you can just keep on enjoying the good stuff over time. And, you know, it's always encouraging when I agree with the chairman's takeaways. He had 4, so I think I have to go back and read it again because I saw the story as twofold. But I'm sure I very much agree that we should stop and talk about the progress that has been made just in the last year. And Saucon, you pointed to this. I really commend the chairman and the staff for staying on top of the recommendations in the NERC staff report, and to the NERC team as well. We are tracking these things. We do see that action has been taken on a lot of the recommendations were included, and it's really important. And I'm also encouraged to see that other regions are not just standing by in the wake of the storm. You know, this assessment describes some proactive steps that most regions are taking to increase winter readiness. I was encouraged by reports on demand response from most of the RTOs, new procurement, above 500 megawatts, I think, in PJM and MISO, additions in CAISO, in ISO New England and New York are expected from the winter. And we've already heard the story that customer demand response, over and over, extreme heat, extreme cold, it's really important. And I think there's more opportunity for systematizing that type of response. But demand response is just one of the examples of the ways where action is being taken. We've heard about a few more. And we also have 43 gigawatts of new capacity online this year, despite the challenges, 68% of which is solar, wind, or battery storage. So that's all good news, and we often focus on the problems, but that's important. The second part, though, is that this doesn't mean it's time to get complacent. As you said, prices will be high. The FERC framework, regulatory framework, our toolbox wasn't designed to get at high prices with all of these competing factors causing them, as you all just described, for this winter. But as we discussed in New England, we do have the opportunity in the medium term to address these issues in a lot of different ways within the market as much as possible, but outside of the market if we need to, so that we don't come back to the same starting line at the beginning of every winter. In addition to the prices, while NOAA predicts average winter conditions, the assessment highlights that, of course, there's a potential for generation shortfalls under extreme weather. Extreme weather is not going away, and across the country, historically, the system hasn't been planned for the set of conditions we're facing. I agree with Commissioner Danley that we should be getting at the systematic reasons, the systematic causes that FERC has jurisdiction over related to the challenges that extreme weather presents. The preliminary data from NERC indicates that each region has cleared its reserve margin, but it's becoming increasingly clear that traditional reserve margin development fails to fully insulate regions from the severe issues that extreme weather conditions bring on, whether it's fuel unavailability, whether it's generator freezing, or other increasingly correlated outages. And regions are taking good steps, but markets should continue to evolve to address changing system needs and risks. And I talked about these questions in my September statement specific to New England, but issues of resource accreditation, seasonal variation, performance payments, those questions are relevant in regions across the country, not just in New England. I think it's our responsibility to continue to ask ourselves whether the market evolution that is happening is keeping pace with the challenge. Look, we have a marathon. This is not a sprint, but it's a fast-running marathon, and there are continuing challenges in each winter. And I think we have more progress to be made on the NERC recommendations. I'm glad to hear the next phase of the cold weather reliability standards pass their final ballot and are soon going to be in front of the NERC board. We need to get those in effect as soon as possible. I think that continuing to work on implementing other improvements, including the next phase of those standards with all due haste is also important. And so I look forward to this continued tracking and discussion. While this is happening, thank you to the staff and to the NERC team and others who are focused around the country on keeping the lights on this winter, this resilience that is needed for our communities. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Clements. Commissioner Christie.
Thanks to staff for the great report, very informative. I would just note a couple of things. The report touched on this sort of tangentially on one of your slides, but didn't really go into detail. One of the things that's been driving gas demand, which ultimately, price is set by supply and demand. One of the things that's been driving gas demand over the last several years has been the premature retirements of coal generating units. Because when you retire a coal generating unit that still may have 15, 20 years of useful life remaining, and let's say it's a 2,000 megawatt unit, you've got to replace the 2,000 megawatts of capacity that you just lost. This has particularly been happening in MISO and PJM. It's going to happen in PJM on a more accelerated basis now. So you got to replace the 2,000 megawatts of capacity. And you got to replace it with dispatchable capacity because you need to have the capacity that you can dispatch. So nuclear, you don't build a nuclear plant overnight, okay? And it's billions and billions of dollars, as we've seen. And until we get to SMRs, small modular nukes, they're going to continue to be. So what's been replacing the premature retirements of coal has been gas, largely combined cycle. Combined cycles can be built relatively quickly. They're very high efficiency, and so that's what we've been doing as a country, but mainly in the RTOs. And it's mainly in the RTOs because that's where the market structures are resulting in the premature retirements of coal and bringing on more gas. And gas is essential dispatchable resource. NERC has been very vocal about that. We're going to have gas through the transition. But it's adding to demand for gas. I mean, every time you replace every time you prematurely retire a coal generating unit, bring in a combined cycle gas, you've added to the demand for gas. So that obviously is putting upward pressure on prices. And MISO has been very vocal about this. And it's also a reliability issue. It's not just a price issue, it's a reliability issue because you're losing dispatchable generation. You got to replace it with dispatchable generation. So it's an issue that's going to continue. It's not going away, it's going to continue. With regard to Texas, I think it's simplistic to say the problem with Texas is, well, they weren't interconnected or they need to weatherize. It's a related problem. The problem in Texas is mainly, first and foremost, I think the market design. When you try to achieve resource adequacy through an energy-only market where no one has an obligation to serve on the generating side, you're going to get the kind of issues that we saw last year with Uri. Because energy-only market, no one has an obligation to serve. No one has an obligation to show up. But again, that's under Texas. That they choose their market design. That's not our jurisdiction. But the way markets are designed is very, very important. And I think when we look at reliability and price, we got to keep that in mind. And with that, I would just note that it's a great report, but that tangential reference to the loss of coal units, it's really starting to bite now in reliability and in consumer cost.
Thank you, Commissioner Christie. Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank staff for the report. It's excellent, very well done. I read it last night. It is thrilling bedtime reading. I won't detail all of my takeaways from the report, but I'll make a couple points of my own. One, as I mentioned when we were in Vermont, I'm struck by the parallels between the energy crisis that's facing Europe and the issues that we're having in some of the regions here in the United States, particularly New England. When I talked to my European colleagues last month, losing track of time, last month, they were concerned about reliability. They were concerned about gas supply shortages, and they were concerned about high prices. And I think they're probably also breathing a sigh of relief if there's a forecast for a mild winter. Now, I'm not suggesting that the problems we have here are nearly as dire as what Europe faces, but I think that it's a sign. It's a sign for all the stakeholders, and that includes FERC, that we continue to focus, refocus, and prioritize reliability as we build out and as we move toward more transmission for our clean energy transition. With that, I do have some comments that I want to read, but first, I think it's telling that as we sit here in 2022, that we're all breathing a sigh of relief, that there's just a forecast for mild winter. Think about that. But just because there's a forecast doesn't mean there won't be extreme weather, okay? And as the report notes, and I'm glad to say that steps have been taken to address some of the near-term issues. For example, in ISO New England, they delayed the retirement of some resources, refined their energy assessment process, and are providing incentives for resources that can perform during capacity scarcity conditions. And I just don't want to pick on ISO New England. I think the report also notes that MISO, as well as ERCOT, they could also be impacted by extreme weather events. But to be fair, they've also made progress, if other people have noted, especially on their winterizing their resources. You know, the problem is, even with these near-term fixes, if we have prolonged cold weather, we all know that we could face an issue where people can go without electricity supply. So that is the question that we're trying to solve for. What I say is that we cannot afford to disassociate reliability from resilience. And so I was glad to see in the report, there was also mention of supply chain issues, from railway issues to manufacturing. One thing that I think we can't forget, though, is that no matter the season or the reason, we have to keep an eye on cybersecurity. And one of the questions that was put to me recently was that, what if we have a 1-2 punch? What if there's an extreme weather event that shuts down a large portion of a region, our critical infrastructure? And then on top of that, since it's no secret that we can sometimes not be prepared for extreme weather, there's a cyber attack that comes on the heels of that extreme weather event. Are we prepared? These are the questions that keep me up and that I continue to think about. But Mr. Chairman, it's not all doom and gloom. As you and others have pointed out, because of the many dialogues, technical conferences, reports that we've seen, there's been some progress. So I want to tip my hat to you, Mr. Chairman, for the efforts that you put forward there. I also want to note that last week, FERC released its report on compliance with our Section 215 SIP reliability standards. And there are some important recommendations included in that report as well that I think all of our utilities need to pay close attention to. I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'll close on this. I think it is imperative that all stakeholders do everything that we can as soon as we can so that we will not be back here having the same discussion in 2023 and 2024. And I had questions, but I'm gonna let all y'all go and and talk directly to staff about those questions. Thank you.
Nothing more on the agenda today.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I don't have any closing comments, but I want to see if our colleagues do, and start with Commissioner Danley.
Nothing in closing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Clements. Commissioner Christie.
Nope.
And Commissioner Phillips. Well, with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. That was a quick ending.
Yeah.